All right, we're talking about quadratics and I. So imaginary numbers. So we're going to calculate the product of the solutions to the equation x squared minus 4x equals negative 14. First we solve for 0. So I add 14 to both sides. I get x squared minus 4x plus 14 equals 0. And notice that if we try to do the factor tree, nothing works out. So 7 and 2 don't have a difference of 4. 14 and 1 don't have a difference of 4. So that's not going to work. So we have to use quadratic formulas. So my a value, my b value, and my c value. So if it's negative b, that would be positive 4, plus or minus square root of b squared. Well, b is negative 4. If we square that, we get 16. Minus 4 times the a value of 1, the c value of 14, all over 2a. So a is 1, so that would be all over 2. So now I break it down further. I do order of operations. So 4 times 14 is 56. So 16 minus 56. So it becomes 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 minus 56 all over 2. And that equals 4 plus or minus the square root of a negative 40 over 2. So we can't have the square root of a negative, but if we do, we're going to call that I. So that really becomes 4 plus or minus I, and I'm going to break down that square root of 40. So 4 is a perfect square, so we get 2 and 2. And then 10 doesn't break down to give us another pair of factors, so 10 is going to be in jail. So 2 breaks out. I breaks out because it's the square root of a negative 1. And then 10 is in jail. And then 2's on the bottom. Now I'm going to look for common factors. So look at my numbers outside of jail. We have 4, 2, and 2. They are all even, so we can divide them all by 2. So if we divide them by 2, 4 divided by 2 gives us 2. 2 divided by 2 gives us 1. So that's really just a 1i, root 10. And then if we divide the bottom one by 2, it's just a 1. So these are our solutions, but our question asks for the product of the solutions. So we need to multiply both of my solutions. So 2 plus I root 10 multiplied by 2 minus I root 10. And these difference of squares, that's what this is. It's going to cancel out the middle term. So 2 times 2 gives us 4. 2 times I root 10 gives us 2I root 10. And then negative I root 10 times 2 is negative 2I root 10. So these actually cancel out since it's difference of squares, and that equals 0. Pretty cool. So that gets rid of the I. And then we have negative I times I. Well, that's negative I squared. Root 10 times root 10 gets rid of the square root and would just be 10. So that's negative I squared times 10. And we're just going to add these terms together. So it's really 4 plus whatever negative I squared times 10 is. Well, I is really the square root of negative 1. So if we square that, in other words, I squared means the square root of negative 1 squared. Well, squaring just is the inverse of square root, so that's going to get rid of the square root sign. So I squared really equals a negative 1. So if I plug in a negative 1 for I squared, and I bring down that sign, it's really a negative negative 1, which is what? A positive 1. So that's really 1 times 10. So it's 4 plus 1 times 10. And do multiplication first, we get 10. It would be 4 plus 10, which is 14. So difference of squares gets rid of those i's, and then I squared is negative 1. And that's really the main idea here.